One day, the most powerful king of all suddenly found himself in a very strange space. A voice mentioned to him that his new life had to begin at that very instant, and that he had to move toward the light. Upon doing so, he notices that there are two people in front of him. He wonders where he is, and we discover that his name is Arthur. He questions who those people are, although at that moment they inform him that they are his mother and his father. His father is named Reynolds, and his mother is named Alice, making Arthur understand that he has just been reborn. After countless victories as a king, he has just become a helpless baby, incapable of controlling himself perfectly. His mother then takes care of changing his diaper, and he feels frustrated, as if he were under some kind of physical limitation. Soon after, on a day like any other, he witnesses his father performing some kind of magical technique. Although after suffering a fall, his mother rushes to heal him. This world is filled with powers that he does not know, something that seems fascinating. As time passes, his father takes responsibility for eliminating the monsters in the area, and at that moment Arthur dedicates himself to examining everything around him. And upon realizing that in that world society has permission to use weapons, he thinks that this could be something dangerous, since it means that he must obtain a weapon as quickly as possible. Although, despite being in a physical form that requires care, he does not dislike the idea of being able to rest calmly, since in his old world he was incapable of doing so, because he was a very powerful king, so he had to deal with many matters, and thus several months pass until he finally learns how to crawl. Even so, after several months, he is still unable to get used to his new name, but when he learns to truly control his body, he begins to slip away from his mother, who thought that he was sleeping. Without drawing attention, he stealthily enters his room, where he becomes interested in books. He ends up seeking all the information possible about that world, where we discover that the continent in which he was born is called Dicathen. In this world, there are three kingdoms: the kingdom of Darv, which is an underground nation of dwarves, the kingdom of Sapin, which is the kingdom of humans where he currently resides, and the last kingdom is the kingdom of Eleanor, where the elves live. The kingdom of Sapin is the most populous kingdom, and is filled with humans. It is very similar to his old world, and is a monarchical nation. Although unlike his world, in that place the throne is inherited, and also compared to his previous world, that place is barely developed. And when he picks up a book, he understands that the reason is because magic exists in this world. Its source of power is something called mana, and the ability to control it is mostly hereditary, although it manifests in 1 out of every 100 people. For magic, there are also two explanations of mana, which are enhancement and conjuring. Conjurers can project their mana and control it at will, while enhancers, as the name itself suggests, use their mana to enhance their physical abilities. But when he remembers that his mother can use healing magic, he imagines that there must be some exceptions. The key to controlling mana is the mana core. Most users discover their powers during puberty, by concentrating dense mana throughout their entire body, and this ends up creating a mana core that, once mastered, turns them into mages. Although he had never heard of mana before, he knows a somewhat similar concept, since in his old world there existed something called Kai, which allowed him to become aware of his internal power and control it, and then release it. And so he tries to use the experience of his old world to channel his Kai, and he is able to feel the flow of mana. But at that moment he is interrupted by his mother. She observes him with strangeness and asks whether he might have made a mess. Arthur thinks that he did not do that, although soon after he feels humiliated, because he was so focused on reading that he ended up soiling himself completely without even noticing. Shortly afterward his mother is seen writing, because although her son is the most adorable thing in the world, he is also someone very curious, and the detail is that they have never heard him laugh. Soon after 2 years pass, and she looks out the window and sees Reynolds training his son. Quickly she goes out to scold him, because he has barely learned how to walk, and he is already teaching him how to use a sword. The boy is only 2 years old, and he finally understands who dominates that marriage, even coming to think that perhaps that world might be something matriarchal. Sometime later, when going to the city, he finds himself somewhat excited, because upon observing the quality and development of the weapons he understands the level of technology, in addition to discovering all kinds of substances that did not exist in his previous life. He becomes amazed at being able to observe magic personally, and upon returning home and having his diaper changed, he thinks that although this new life of his is very suffocating, it is not unpleasant at all, since his parents take care of all his needs. Questioning whether this is how all families should be, he cannot say, since in his previous life he was in an orphanage. As he falls asleep in his mother's arms, she says that she feels very happy, and that it is very good to be able to observe how he strives to read books and see his excitement every time he goes to the city. Perhaps he inherited this from his father, and when he grows up he will want to explore the world, although she would prefer that he lived a calmer and more serene life. As the days go by, he observes his father training, and his father is an enhancer, and upon seeing how fabulous he is, he thinks that he has no time to waste, and now his mother takes him to take a little nap. Along the way he makes some gestures, showing what he wants to read. His mother refuses, since now it is time to sleep. But after he pleads and uses a cute look, she tries to resist, but cannot, and therefore ends up giving in to his requests. Upon opening the book, he begins to practice what he has been doing for 2 years, about how to produce a mana core, taking responsibility for gathering the countless fragments of mana dispersed throughout his body, focusing them into a single point, and this task requires considerable effort, but it is bearing fruit. When he finally manages to make his mana circulate, the great explosion ends up occurring. Reynolds jumps to protect his wife, although when they turn around they become worried about an act. When entering the house and searching for him, they are surprised to see that he has not even completed 3 years of age and has already developed his mana core. While he is satisfied, because his long years of study have yielded results. Well, it was only 2 years, right? But it is there. But at that moment the rubble was about to fall on him. But without wasting time his parents jump to the rescue. His mother, crying, rejoices that he is fine, and Arthur wonders why she is crying. Since they merely fulfilled their duty, therefore they should feel proud. And this is a feeling that he is currently incapable of understanding. It is something that cannot be learned from books, and that he never learned in his past life. He ends up thanking them and passing out. And then in a scene change we see a bizarre cave, and a very strange creature that is there. Some time later we discover that Arthur's name in his past life was Gray. At one point an emissary was captured, and he was planning to attempt an attack against the king. This is a serious offense that is punished with immediate execution. However, the council was very merciful, and he was deported with his family back to his country, where a sentence awaited him. The desperate man accepts his guilt. He tried to attack the king, but his family has nothing to do with it, and for that reason he desperately begs not to involve his wife and children, because returning to his country would be a suffering worse than death. He asks Gray to please forgive them and punish only him. However, the council warns that his sentence has already been decreed. But Gray, upon understanding that their return to their country would cause greater suffering, as an act of mercy decides to end the man's family, because dying is a better fate than returning to their country. And Gray also did not have many options, since despite being king, those who truly controlled everything were the council. While he was nothing more than the figure of an imposing warrior, the man with tears in his eyes for having lost his family before him. Thanks Gray for having freed them from a worse destiny. After everything we return to the current world, where Reynolds tells his son that now he can be like his father, and then he hands him his gauntlets. But Arthur lets it go, since he does not have the size to use them, since he would probably be at a disadvantage even before approaching his enemy. They quickly begin their training, where Arthur demonstrates great abilities. But upon seeing that his father imbues magic into his sword, or rather into the piece of wood, he does the same. Reynolds ends up being surprised, and after destroying the staff he asks Reynolds how he did. In a scene change we see his father commenting to his wife that Arthur definitely needs a true master, but she refuses since they had agreed that he would train him. Reynolds informs that this is what he wanted, but Arthur possesses very great talent, and would gain much more with a true mentor. Alice continues to refuse, because she cannot allow her dear Arthur to go to a distant city. But Reynolds explains that he is only 4 years old and has already managed to pierce something coated with mana, so there are no alternatives left but to begin discussing the future of their son. And since emotions sometimes cloud judgment, Arthur proposes that it would be better for everyone to go together. Upon hearing this proposal, his parents understand that they were naive and quickly prepare to pack their bags. They were really thinking about leaving the kid alone at 4 years of age. It was just everyone together. Thankfully the kid is smart, and thus time passed and Arthur meets his parents' former group, the Twin Horns. The red-haired man tells Arthur that they already knew each other, although certainly he does not remember, since he was very young. But in fact Arthur does remember them, and we discover that the red-haired man is named Adam, the girl is named Jasmine Flamesworth, and the person who is hugging him is named Angela, and the big guy is named Durden. The leader of all of them is Ellen, and thus the youngsters begin their journey, where Arthur considers that method of transportation quite primitive. It is very different from his past life, and currently our group is heading toward a city called Cirrus. Although while they are resting, Arthur and the others feel the presence of monsters. A pack of wolves attacks the group, and Jasmine quickly gets rid of some of them. The twin horns work exceptionally well as a team. While Angela and Durden, who are conjurers, attack from a distance, Jasmine and Ellen, who are enhancers, improve their physical capabilities. Once everyone finishes off the monsters, at nightfall they eat their meat. Although Alice notices that Reynolds is injured, she prepares to heal his wounds. But the group establishes a perimeter, since Alice is a special type of mage, called an emitter, with healing powers, and because they are quite rare, mages do not usually heal people just out of nowhere, as that would make them a target. This is one of the reasons why Alice and Reynolds lived in the countryside, in anonymity. After finishing eating, Adam asks Reynolds if he could take Arthur to practice a bit. And then we see everyone excited waiting for the fight. Although it seems they forgot that Arthur is only 4 years old, he, upon seeing that Adam does not intend to hold back easily, surprises him with his great abilities. But since he is still very small, his body does not help, and for that reason Adam sends him flying. Angela takes charge of stopping him, and afterward they scold Adam for not knowing how to restrain himself, but he merely apologizes. Since Arthur is a small prodigy, so there is no way to hold back. While everyone is scolding the poor Adam, Jasmine approaches Arthur to ask him how he did that. Arthur observes her, thinking that he recognizes that look, a look that shows that this person does not intend to give up until getting what she wants. So he goes and explains it to her, and thus a few days pass, and the journey continues without any mishaps. And during their stops they take advantage of the time to train Arthur. He learned many new things, and by sharing knowledge from his previous life, there was also something revealing for him. Jasmine seems to have liked him quite a lot, but when everything was progressing relatively well, something unexpected happened. Jasmine gives Arthur a knife as a birthday present, while the others think it is very strange for Jasmine to grow attached to someone. Although when they were about to continue their journey, Arthur noticed that his mother was acting in a very strange way, but with little to say they continued their trip. And upon arriving in a rocky area they are intercepted by a group of bandits. They find themselves completely surrounded. While Arthur thinks that this way it seems that everyone in the world is a bad person, the leader of the bandits orders the attack, but warns them not to attack the woman and the children, since they could sell them for a higher price. Quickly the Twin Horns group initiates the counterattack. Individually they have the advantage, but they are overwhelmed by numbers in an overwhelming manner. Unity then becomes strength, and they begin to wear the bandits down. Reynolds ends up being wounded, but quickly he stands up and warns Alice and Arthur not to approach, because they would have serious problems if those bandits discovered Alice's power. They ask Arthur to take his mother away from that place. Although Arthur replies that he can also fight, since he should know that he is strong as well. But Reynolds responds that he must use that strength to protect her, revealing that his mother is pregnant. Upon hearing this, Arthur understands why his mother had been acting so strangely, and upon realizing that he will be an older brother, he understands that he must protect his mother and his younger brother, or younger sister. We will find out later. Quickly Alice and Arthur flee, and the bandits run after them, but Reynolds holds them back. Jasmine and Adam make sure to protect them, while Arthur thinks that someone like him is running away, someone who had nothing, and now he is running so that what he has will not be taken from him, thinking that perhaps this is karma, but in any case he must protect his mother. But soon after a conjurer ends up appearing and introduces himself, but without hesitating Arthur pushes his mother to move her away from danger, but he ends up falling. However, he does not intend to die without taking that man with him, so he grabs him with his dagger to lead him to his end. Durden and Angela try to stop him, but unfortunately they cannot reach him, while Arthur, in his mind, can only think that perhaps he would not have achieved anything in this new life. But despite that he feels that his heart is full, and now he can understand what that man had lost. He can feel a feeling of joy and sadness together, and when the moment to choose arrives, there is only one thing to do. The only thing he regrets is that he would have loved to be an older brother. But we see that Arthur is there as if nothing had happened. Lying on the ground, they question that fact. Although at that moment a strange and enormous creature appears before him. It says good morning to him, calling him by his name, and Arthur finds himself perplexed before this creature, once again questioning what that thing is doing in that place. Although the most important thing now is to know whether it is his friend or his enemy. He jumps quickly, although the colossal creature gives him only a slap. At the same time it warns him that he still has much to learn, and tells him that it will be by his side, while Arthur asks what it is referring to. At that moment the creature stands up, while picking up a fruit, and comments that he must be hungry. And even if he is not hungry, he needs to eat, and Arthur is astonished, while the monster says that for now, he should not move, since he is very lucky to have survived that fall. Arthur then begins to cry and tries to ask questions, but the monster informs him that he will not get answers until he starts eating. He, without wasting time, immediately begins to devour the fruits, and the creature comments that yes, he was hungry. While Arthur, somewhat worried, asks about his father and his mother, it responds that it cannot leave that place, but it can see far beyond what many people can and reach many things that others cannot. And using a kind of strange magic, it shows that his family is alive, and that a few days ago they continued their journey. Arthur cries with emotion upon discovering that his family is well. He can feel a deep relief and gives thanks, although he does not know how to name the creature. The creature replies that he can call her Sylvia, and in a scene change we see two strange silhouettes commenting on what the Lord should do. The other replies that he should already know the answer, and the younger one responds that he will not be able to keep any secrets, and thus the scene ends, leaving everything open and us without knowing anything. It is then that we see Arthur, who spent several days with Sylvia, and when his wounds healed, he wished to return to his home as quickly as possible, but he understood that this would not happen quickly, since according to Sylvia, they are in a forest called El Shrine. This is a place filled with outlaws and wild animals. Although Sylvia has a trick to avoid them, she can understand his desire to return to his home as quickly as possible, but creating a rift in space requires extensive preparation, and it is then that we discover that her plan is basically to create a rift in space-time, in order to open a portal that would bring him as close as possible to his family. And during this wait, Arthur took advantage of the time to train. He comments that Sylvia never talks about herself, and due to her monstrous appearance the little Arthur had screamed in fear on more than one occasion. Although despite that appearance her personality was quite warm and kind. At a certain moment Arthur decided to meditate, and Sylvia is surprised to see that the little boy already has a mana core, and demonstrating it, he asks whether she could do that. Although this ended up surprising Arthur, since he sees how she is using magic and gathering it at the same time, something similar to refueling an airplane in mid-flight. This makes him realize that humans have many preconceived ideas about mana, and only think about accumulating it and using it. Although beyond humans, this is something very natural, especially for creatures called mana beasts. This is something as simple as breathing, and she asks him whether he would like to learn it. Arthur obviously says yes, and Sylvia asks what he intends to do with the knowledge that he will acquire, because when he obtains this ability, he will be even more powerful, and she wishes to know what he will do with this strength. And Arthur, pondering over everything he has suffered, states that he will confront anyone who wishes to take away what matters most to him. Sylvia then gives another slap and asks him to answer properly. She does not intend to teach this ability to someone with such a cold gaze, and Arthur asks why not, since after all it is normal to kill one's enemies. Sylvia asks whether by any chance he likes filling his head with ideas about killing his enemies. Believing that she certainly hit him very hard and asking if he is alright, he replies that he is. So Sylvia places one of her fingers on his forehead, mentioning that she could destroy him in seconds. Although she could also caress him gently, she asks Arthur which one he prefers, and obviously he is not foolish enough to say he wants the first. Sylvia then replies that she also wants to caress him. After all, anger and hatred burn easily and express themselves through violence. In the moment it may seem good, but in the end hatred is the only thing that remains, and that is why she does not want him to use the life she saved for something like that. Arthur understands and remembers everything that happened in his past life, and at that moment Arthur can feel how that being seemed to know everything about him. But that should not be the case. Sylvia then asks him again what he intends to do when he becomes stronger, and after reflecting with a much calmer mind and recalling those good moments, Arthur replies that he will use this power to protect those who are dear to him. Sylvia is delighted with this answer, although on the other hand we see how another strange creature mentions that he must be very close, and that there is nowhere Sylvia can hide from him. And at that moment Arthur has a dream about his past life, where upon leaving his room he met one of his advisors. He knew that his title of king was nothing more than just a title, since he had no real authority, as all politics were in the hands of the parliament, and as resources were depleted and birth rates declined. The role of a king was to act as an executor of war, little more than a combat machine. At that moment the advisor asks what brings him to that place. Although he merely walks away, announcing his retirement, and in his room we see how he destroyed his crown. And now, returning to the present, Sylvia teaches him how to gather and use magic. Once he is able to do so, his magical capabilities will be considerably expanded. While he tries to control this magic, he recalls how in his previous life, the only thing he desired to defeat any opponent was control of it. And now in this new world he quickly managed to learn the ability that Sylvia taught him. However, upon sensing a strange presence, Sylvia hides him behind a pile of rocks and asks him not to make any noise, covering him with her magic. And before Sylvia, the previous creature, presents itself, she replies that she is quite impressed that he managed to find her. Although the other creature responds that it was thanks to the smell of her blood. He orders her to go with him, but Sylvia refuses, and he, seeing that he has no option left other than to use violence, uses violence. Sylvia manages to protect herself with difficulty, but Arthur feels very frustrated seeing that he cannot help her. She warns him telepathically that he should not worry. Then she destroys her armor, revealing her true appearance, leaving Arthur surprised to see that it is a dragon. But that was obvious, given the armor she was wearing, right? Anyway, Sylvia gathers energy, unleashes a powerful beam and attacks the other creature. But it merely responds that it is absurd, since that kind of power will cost a great deal. Although she does not mind, because she was supposedly happy. However, the other monster uses a massive amount of dark energy and repeatedly attacks Sylvia. She is more concerned about Arthur than about her own battle, and in this way ends up giving the monster enough time to charge another powerful attack. But Sylvia uses her ability by freezing time, extending Arthur's time and her own. He asks to go with her, and she warns that she used her power. But now the most important thing is whether she now looks more like Sylvia without the armor. And indeed, now without the armor she does look more like Sylvia. Arthur, surprised, asks whether she was always a dragon, and she replies that this is what humans call them. But now there is no time to talk, so she opens a rift in space so that Arthur can get closer to his family. Although she regrets it, since the exit is not as close as she expected. But she is certain that he will be fine, for she taught him what was necessary to survive. Before Arthur leaves, she asks him once again about his purpose, and he replies that his power is meant to protect his loved ones. And she then declares that this is a promise. And she then hands an egg to Arthur, along with a feather, warning Arthur that he must wrap the egg with this feather and take good care of it. And besides that, she grants him a power. Arthur asks what all of that is, but Sylvia replies that he will know at the appropriate moment. That said, it is time for them to say goodbye. Although Arthur laments having to part from her, Sylvia confesses that she could actually have sent him home immediately. But she chose not to do so. Since she appreciated his company, Arthur feels sad because he was unable to protect her, even though she taught him so many things. Although she lets him know that this outcome had already been foreseen. In his mind, Arthur, somewhat saddened, questions whether the gratitude he felt for Sylvia made him feel this way, or whether it was the time they spent together that had changed him. To him, it does not matter whether she is a dragon or a monster. He considers her part of his family, although she replies that he already has a mother. But Arthur then tells her that she is his grandmother. Sylvia is moved by his words and asks whether he could call her that again. Arthur indulges her, while Sylvia, crying, thanks him. After that, she encourages him to move forward, and Arthur takes the egg and wraps it with the feather. But as he crosses the portal, he warns that he cannot do it alone and asks her to go with him. But this is a sad farewell, and once Arthur manages to depart, she unfreezes time and takes the attack head-on, ending her life. But the other creature approaches her, commenting that this could not have ended someone like her. Sylvia quickly takes advantage of this and attacks him, burning fiercely and causing a great explosion. After that, we see both silhouettes once again, where one asks whether that was enough, and the other replies that it was more than enough. And now the rest depends solely on her. And here we still do not understand anything, right? But anyway, while Arthur passes through the portal, Sylvia speaks to him mentally, warning him that everything will be fine. And although she can understand that he feels sad, the world is full of pain, and for that reason they must turn that pain into faith. Arthur feels incapable of doing so, but she warns him that, step by step, he will be able to achieve it. She knows that he will succeed. After all, he is the most powerful and strongest king of all, causing Arthur to be surprised upon discovering that Sylvia knew about his past life, and, for the last time, she asks him not to let his heart be filled with hatred and anger, and hopes that he will let his new life be filled with light, calling him King Grey, leading him to question whether it was she who caused him to be reborn in that world. And after that, Arthur appears in a forest, he thinks about fulfilling his promise to Sylvia. But suddenly Arthur hears a scream and, without hesitating, uses his magic to move quickly through the forest. Without wasting much time, he quickly detects a caravan of slave traffickers, where there is a young elf held captive. This is very valuable loot, since elves are sold for a high price, and Arthur, recalling the incident he experienced with his family like this before leaving, does not intend to allow anyone else to suffer the same fate. Although he remembers Sylvia's words, for that reason, he tries to control his negative emotions. Instead of attacking recklessly, he decides to follow them, waiting until nightfall. At dusk, the slave traffickers stop to rest, and, in the process, he thinks that following them could be beneficial, since they could guide him to a human settlement. The detail is that those vile bandits intend to amuse themselves with the girl before selling her, and Arthur cannot allow that, but, for now, he prefers to prepare himself and wait for the perfect moment. And once night falls, he observes the wolves, questioning why they are so obedient. Upon examining them more closely, he notices that they possess magical collars, but he uses the wolves, drawing their attention in order to cause a disturbance. He manages to distract the bandits, who need to go calm them down, so as not to attract magical beasts. Arthur takes advantage of one of them separating from the rest to finish him off, so he takes his knife, but one of them, seeing that his companion is taking too long, goes to look for him. Arthur takes advantage of the moment to get rid of the second bandit, and at that moment another arrives, and Arthur attacks him instantly, and the detail is that his body is very small, so fighting is very exhausting. And so this third man, instead of killing him, he only leaves him incapacitated. The leader of the slavers, upon seeing that it is a child causing trouble, is surprised, but he becomes excited when he sees that a small child is capable of using magic, and he already thinks about the money that will come from selling him. And the bandit is a conjurer, who attacks Arthur. He manages to dodge, and then attacks him with his sharp dagger, but the bandit blocks him and kicks him. While Arthur is on the ground, he ends up being lifted up, since the bandit wants to see the quality of his new product. But Arthur seizes a moment to use his magic and burn the man's leg, but that only provokes the man's fury, and he decides to kill him. However, Arthur quickly stabs him in the head, and the other one begs for forgiveness. But Arthur replies that she most likely also begged for forgiveness, and they did not listen to her. Then, shortly after that, he meets her and removes the blindfold from her eyes. She cannot see his face and wonders what is happening. Although when everything returns to normal, he tells the little girl that she is no longer in danger. Next, he takes care to cover the bodies so that the girl does not see them, but she tells him that he is also a child, and, out of curiosity, she asks what happened to the people who kidnapped her. Arthur, trying to hide what he has just done, replies that they suffered a carriage accident, and that she should not think about it, since what matters now is that she is safe. A little later, he equips himself with the items that the bandits had. Although before leaving, the girl takes his hand and makes a pleading expression, as if saying, "Please do not abandon me, I am scared." Arthur replies that he needs to return to his family, and that she will no longer be in any danger, because those people will not pursue her anymore. However, she continues to look at him with the same cute little eyes, and inside, he wonders how he could abandon such a kind girl in the middle of the forest. Arthur, a little confused, asks in which direction they kidnapped her. She points, and he thinks that it is in the opposite direction from where he is going. He asks whether she knows how far her home is, but she replies that when they captured her, she was hunting insects, so she does not know. He cannot believe it, although he thinks that children are usually like that. And soon after he remembers when he was a child, and feels that he cannot leave her to her fate, so he tells her that he will take her home. The wolves then begin to flee, and Arthur thinks that he should end them without making them suffer, since he cannot control them. The girl suggests freeing them, because if they leave them there, they will die. But Arthur is not very sure about that, since they could attack him. But she lets him know that the people of the forest value all forms of life, and after freeing them, the wolves leave. The next day, they move forward for a few hours, until they decide to rest. When Arthur asks her name, she replies that her name is Tesha, and Arthur introduces himself to her, then gives her something to eat, since she needs to recover her energy, because there is still a long walk ahead for them. And then he feels that the words he spoke sound very similar to Sylvia's. Tesha then tastes the soup, and it is terrible, since Arthur has always considered food merely a means of nutrition, so he does not care much about flavor. When it comes to behaving like a child, he should learn a little more from Tesha. She, somewhat curious, asks what he is doing in the forest of Elshire. He replies that he was separated from his family, and asks her how things are in the land of the elves. She says that everything is very fun, although since her parents are always very busy, she spends most of her time with her grandfather and her caretakers. Thus, they continue moving forward, and it is a very long journey. But along the way, she starts playing with the little things that are there, and asks Arthur if he wants one. But he says no, yet Tesha does not care and puts one on his ear, saying that it looks like he has an earring. While Arthur wonders whether this is how children play nowadays, as they continue moving forward, she tells him that when her mana awakens, she will train at her master's house. Arthur asks whether she will simply find a master out of nowhere, and whether there is no more organized education. Tesha cannot understand, and Arthur asks her to just forget it. As they continue moving forward, they realize that they are being followed. At nightfall, he notices that it is that horned wolf from before, and he thinks that he should have killed them. But he asks Tesha to rest, while he stays on guard, although later Tesha asks if he is sure that he does not want to sleep. Her grandfather had told her that she should not sleep with any man, but she promises not to tell anyone if she sleeps with him. Arthur replies that she does not need to worry, since he is not tired, and Tesha goes back into the tent, although she quickly comes out once more, telling Arthur that he should enter the tent, because if they see him, they will only see a child outside, and that could get them into trouble. Although in reality Tesha is just afraid, and Arthur asks her if she is afraid of ghosts, and she apologizes, saying that she is only thinking about safety, and that if he is going to keep watch, it is better that he does so from inside the tent. With no other options, Arthur enters it, and Tesha warns him not to dare leave without telling her first. In addition, he has to stay there, because when she wants to pee, he has to accompany her. Arthur replies yes, and tells her to go to sleep once and for all, but she keeps talking endlessly. She asks whether he comes from the human kingdom, and if it is true that humans are pigs who have many wives. Arthur asks who the hell told her that, and Tesha replies that it was her grandfather. Arthur explains that there are certainly elves who are not kind either, although the most important thing is that she knows that this is something very delicate to say. Tesha replies that she does not really know the truth, but in the end, she falls asleep. Meanwhile, Arthur feels like he has her as a younger sister, and thus the night passes, and the next day they continue their journey. Tesha greatly enjoys Arthur's company, although this bothers him quite a lot. He was very worried about his family, and did not want to take long to reunite with them. But during their journey, something unexpected happened. Arthur began to feel an unbearable pain emanating from his mana core. Tesha, worried, goes to look for some medicinal herbs, while Arthur goes to rest a little. But his pain does not improve, and becomes more and more frequent. But suddenly, one of the horned wolves appears in front of him. Arthur, in a state of alert, asks Tesha not to come closer, but the horned wolf only leaves him meat and then moves away. Tesha lets him know that the wolf is returning a favor, so that tonight our little ones can finally eat something tasty. While they eat, Tesha shows some mushrooms, and they are quite nutritious, although after eating them, poor Arthur ends up with severe diarrhea. She apologizes to him, because they may have been too strong for human, and after that, the youngsters go to sleep. Tesha talks a lot, but the poor Arthur starts to feel sleepy, so she covers him with a blanket, and the next day, as they move forward, he tries to hide his pain, while she apologizes for everything that happened because of her. Arthur replies that there is nothing to worry about. After all, they are already very close. At that moment, Tesha mentions that now that she knows him quite well, what he thinks about her calling him diarrhea, as if they were friends, and he replies that she can do that if she wishes. After all, for a lowly villager like him, accompanying Lady Tesha is an honor he does not deserve. She says that such jokes are for older people, and he mocks her, saying that she is talking like a crybaby, since she does not even want to pee without him. She, irritated, keeps moving forward, although suddenly they come across the strange portal. Tesha, emotional, tells Arthur that they have finally arrived, and she extends her hand so that they can enter together. Once inside, Arthur is surprised and frightened to realize that he is surrounded by a group of elves. They approach quickly, and Arthur immediately turns to Tesha, but upon seeing her expression, he feels that he let himself be convinced too quickly by her words. Elves and humans have been enemies for a long time, and he allowed himself to be convinced by the innocence of that little girl. But when Tesha hears that the soldiers are about to execute Arthur, she orders them to stop, since it was he who saved her life. But the soldiers intend to execute him anyway, because they believe that he merely manipulated the princess to enter elven territory. But fortunately, Varian arrives at the scene and orders them to release the boy, and tells his granddaughter that seeing a human together with the missing princess It is quite natural that the soldiers would have reacted that way. It is then that he introduces himself to Arthur as the former king of Leonor. His name is Varian, and he thanks Arthur for saving his granddaughter. Arthur is surprised to discover Tesha's origin, since he never imagined that he would be traveling together with a princess. Arthur cannot believe it, as he was unable to sense any indication that she was royalty. And at that moment her parents arrive at the place, worried about her. Upon seeing them, Arthur understands that they are the kings of Leonor, but the king, upon seeing him, asks the soldiers why they did not capture that human. But Varian informs his son that he gave orders not to detain him, because despite being a barbarian, it was he who rescued the princess. She tells her parents that it was Arthur who saved her, therefore now they are indebted to him. She proposes inviting him to her castle and asks Arthur to accompany her, since she will ask her chef to prepare his favorite dishes. And right after she looks at her parents with a threatening stare, they allow everything without any objection. But Varian warns Arthur that they will talk later. While Tesha takes Arthur by the hand, he thinks that he can feel a strange power emanating from Varian, and shortly after, as they walk through the city, Arthur is watched with reluctance by all the inhabitants. He is quite surprised, impressed by the city's infrastructure. As he read in the books, humans are still in conflict with the elves because of past wars, and it is incredible that he can witness the elven city from so close. Tesha also seems quite peculiar to him, although he still cannot understand why she had that expression at that moment, nor the pain that he is feeling now. But he is determined not to let his guard down once again, and upon arriving at the castle, Tesha introduces Arthur to her servants, ordering them to offer the best hospitality to the one who saved her life, while wondering what they should do first. However, Arthur interrupts her, first proposing to talk about what they have experienced so far, and in a scene change where everyone is gathered at the table, Tesha asks him why he is still standing and orders him to sit down. The soldiers take it upon themselves to seat him, and then order snacks, while Arthur wonders if all of this is correct. At that moment, the king of Eleanor introduces himself as Alduin, and his wife also introduces herself. Her name is Midiel, and Arthur then pays his respects, introducing himself with his full name, stating that he was born in a poor village in the kingdom of Sapin, and as is evident, he could not present himself to human royalty, much less to elven royalty, and therefore he is very grateful for having this opportunity. Alduin replies that for someone born in poverty, he is quite well-mannered. However, Arthur thinks that although it was a rather exaggerated introduction, he will gain nothing if they continue treating him like a child. Next, he begins to explain everything that happened, although when recounting his encounter with Tesha, Alduin becomes irritated, certain that those responsible were those barbaric humans. But Arthur replies very respectfully that a slave trafficker is an occupation, not a matter of race. Brian asks how he managed to rescue Tesha. Despite being just a child, he replies that despite being a child, he is also a mage. Although the elves are unable to believe that a mere child defeated a slave trafficker, one of the soldiers accuses him of deceiving the princess to infiltrate their lands. But Varian orders the soldier to sheath his sword again, and not to think about repeating that a third time. So the soldier, restraining himself, decides to remain silent. Tesha warns that her friend is not deceiving anyone. She was truly kidnapped, and even heard something about Vendela. And upon remembering that moment, her mother hugs her to comfort her daughter, while Alduin informs Arthur that he now believes him. But Arthur tells him that as he already explained before, he was also attacked by bandits and became trapped in that place. He only wished to return to Sapin to reunite with his family, and Alduin asks whether as a reward he wishes to return to his land, saying that he knows very well that elves despise humans, so how does he dare ask him to repay a favor to a human? But Arthur replies that that is precisely why he did it, since if elves believe humans are barbarians, him behaving in the exact opposite way is a very hard blow to them, and Alduin ends up feeling that, while Varian lets him know that he has left him speechless. Tesha intervenes on Arthur's behalf and begins to look at her father with disapproval, and that ends up calming him down a little. He informs Arthur that the problem lies in the fact that the teleportation gate to the kingdom of Sapin can only be used once every 7 years after a meeting with the leaders of the 3 tribes, and there are still 5 years left until the gate is reopened. And Arthur feels very frustrated because that is far too long. But Alduin informs him that it is also too long to detain a human, and therefore he will have his soldiers escort him back to his home. Arthur feels relieved, but suddenly he feels an extreme pain and Varian notices it. Shortly after, while Arthur is in his quarters taking a bath, he can feel that the pain is becoming more and more unbearable, wondering what it could be. When he goes out to breathe some fresh air, He thinks that he must do something to find the cause of this pain. Although at that moment he notices that Tesha is gathered with her parents, he ends up remembering the moments he spent with his own parents, and it is safe to say that they will not die so easily, and he trusts that they are still alive. But he also wonders whether they will welcome him with a smile, just as Tesha's parents did with her. At that moment, she notices Arthur's presence, and shortly after approaches him. Arthur asks if he interrupted her spoiled princess moment, but she apologizes to him, because her family was very rude to him. But Arthur reassures her, after all her family only showed great concern for her, and for that reason he recommends that she continue playing the role of a spoiled princess. But she replies that it will be the same with him when he returns to his parents. However, upon seeing Arthur's reaction, she asks what is going through his mind, and he replies that he truly wonders whether his parents will genuinely be happy to reunite with him. To begin with, they were attacked because of him. He caused those problems, and therefore he wonders if they will miss him. Deep inside, he feels frustrated because he failed to protect his family. But Tesha scolds him, saying that obviously his parents will miss him, and that she herself already misses him just by thinking that he will go home. Then, out of nowhere, the corridor becomes completely illuminated thanks to the fireflies. Arthur imagines his parents in them, yet he questions what he saw on that occasion. Tesha is quite enchanted by the flowers, while Arthur understands that he was foolish to imagine that, since it was simply him fighting against his dark past, and he apologizes to Tesha, commenting that he likes that flower as well. But he senses a presence and quickly attacks it, which turns out to be Virian. Arthur, worried, asks whether he was trying to harm his own granddaughter, but Virian replies asking if he truly believes he could kill her with just that. And Arthur, upon seeing what is in his hand, feels deceived, while Virian congratulates him because he blocked and counterattacked instantly, and that helped him believe even more that his words were true, and that he truly defeated the slave traffickers. Tesha asks her grandfather to stop bothering him, since Arthur is not like the humans he hates. But Virian informs her that he was not there merely to bother them. He is there because he finally found someone interesting after a long time. He throws a wooden sword to Arthur, and then moves Tesha out of the way, because he wishes to test the boy's abilities. Arthur can sense that the elder is extremely fast and very strong. His attacks fail to reach him, so he tries to increase his speed even further. But Virian ends up destroying his wooden sword. One of the fragments heads toward Tesha, but Arthur quickly deflects it, and then gathers magic, advancing toward Virian, but he blocks it easily, making Arthur recall the fangs and claws of wild beasts. They fight only by instinct, and Virian sends him flying through the air, but Arthur counterattacks quickly, striking him on the forehead, and Virian cannot believe that he was hit. Therefore, he declares that it is time for the second round. At that moment, his granddaughter pinches him and tells him to stop bothering Arthur. But Virian replies that in fact it is Arthur who is taking advantage of him. Arthur then replies to Virian that it is an honor to have someone like him overestimating him. Upon hearing this, Virian responds that if what he says is true, then he expects him to become his disciple, and asks what he thinks of the offer. Arthur then replies that he has not had the chance to inform his parents that he is safe, so Virian responds that there is a way for him to inform his parents of his whereabouts. Arthur is surprised to hear that, but suddenly he once again feels unbearable pain, and upon seeing him, Virian comments that it is as he imagined. Arthur inherited the beast will, so he recommends that he become his disciple, otherwise he will perish. Then we now see Arthur, who is in great suffering, due to all the pain he is enduring. At that moment, a monster appears before him, and he wonders whether this is a manifestation of his anxiety or a manifestation of his responsibility. But upon hearing his name several times, he awakens and finds Tesha on top of him. He replies that she is bothering him, calling her the monster from his dreams, and asks for 5 more minutes to keep sleeping. Tesha, irritated, orders him to get up because her grandfather is waiting. Upon waking, she asks if it is true that he will stay with them. But Arthur replies that he does not know yet, since first he needs to inform his parents that he is fine. But when he calls her princess, Tesha becomes upset, since she had told him to call her Tesha. Meanwhile, we see the king insisting that his father should not allow Arthur to remain in that kingdom, since that goes against tradition. But Virian informs him that if he wishes that child to remain, it is because he has grown attached to him. That is his only reason. At that moment, Tesha tells her father that Arthur saved her, but her father orders her to remain silent. Virian then says that he has had enough, and takes them with him. On the way, Arthur asks how long it will take to reach that mysterious friend. Virian is taking Arthur to one of his acquaintances, and this acquaintance is capable of communicating with his parents. Along the way, Tesha ends up falling asleep, and Virion informs Arthur that he woke up very early because he is very interested in knowing what the future holds for him, revealing that as the sole heir to the throne, Tesha was raised in a lonely environment from childhood until adulthood. Her trust was betrayed many times, which is the reason why she keeps her distance from people. But he noticed that she is always by Arthur's side, and she smiles a lot because of that, and he feels grateful. Arthur is only observing and thinking that even this elderly man thanks a child when necessary, and he feels that he can truly trust that man. And a few hours later, they finally arrive at their destination. While Arthur wonders who this mysterious person, who is Virion's friend, might be, suddenly, Virion starts kicking the door, calling his mysterious friend an old witch. She opens the door already irritated, and introduces herself as Hina Dicathen. She is a very special mage, and Arthur also introduces himself to her, while she invites them inside. Once inside, she wonders how she is going to help him. Arthur tells Hina that Virion said he had a very special friend, but Hina says that he is misleading the boy, as she informs Arthur that she is basically a clairvoyant. She can sense that he is quite special, since not even she can see all parts of him. But getting straight to the point, she asks whether he wishes to communicate with his parents and tell them that he is fine. Arthur then confirms that he does, and she asks him to simply observe that bucket of water. He concentrates and thinks about his parents, and she uses magic while warning him that he must describe them in as much detail as possible. And once he is able to see them, he will be able to talk to them. Arthur concentrates and more details begin to appear. We then see that they are about to have lunch, somewhat sad since that day is their son's birthday, and they can only think about that horrible incident. Reynolds still blames himself, since he asked his son to protect his mother, and if he had not asked that, Arthur would probably still be alive, since they believe Arthur died in that fall. Then they arrive at the city where they were received by one of Reynolds' friends, where he began working. While they mourn the loss of their son, Arthur suddenly speaks to them, leaving them perplexed. He informs them that he is fine and still alive, as well as being in the land of the elves, the kingdom of Elinor. He can now speak with them thanks to a special mage, and he apologizes to them, because even though he made an agreement to return to his parents as soon as possible, he cannot do so now, since there is something wrong with his body and he needs to recover. He asks his parents not to worry, as he will return as soon as he gets better. They have their faith renewed and feel relieved to know that their son is alive. Arthur tells them not to blame themselves, and says that he does not know if he will be able to contact them again, but tells them not to worry, saying that he loves them, and upon losing the connection, he can only think that he feels relieved that his parents are well, and he does not intend to make them suffer any further. He asks Virion to make him his disciple, and sometime later, we see Tesha telling her father that Arthur saved her twice, and that if they expel him now, people will think that the elves are ungrateful. After thinking for a while, the king ends up accepting it, and Virion informs his son that he himself will train Arthur. Therefore, he warns that he must make the entire country aware of it. Furthermore, he thinks about taking full responsibility for him. Shortly after, we see the king apologizing to Arthur, saying that perhaps he has been on the throne for so long that he became stubborn and old-fashioned. Arthur saved his daughter, and is now his father's first disciple. They apologize to him and welcome him into the kingdom. While Arthur wonders what made him change his attitude so suddenly, but upon seeing Tesha and Virion, he understands that the king is not capable of saying no to his father and his daughter. However, as they shake hands, Tesha interrupts them. She informs her father that if he truly cares about all of this, he has to let Arthur go out to play, because she wants to show him everything and more of the kingdom. She is excited and takes the poor Arthur to show him the kingdom. He is surprised upon seeing the place, while Tesha is extremely excited, wishing to show the entire city to him. However, along the way they encounter a young elf, who tells Arthur not to touch him so as not to contaminate him with his human germs. What a jerk. He says that even if the elder Virion likes him, that does not mean he belongs there. Then the rest of the young elves support him, calling Arthur an ape. But Tesha tells Arthur to just ignore them, and the other elf tells Tesha that she should not associate with that person, and asks that he himself be her escort. But Arthur starts to get annoyed and calls him a dirty elf. The small elf wonders what the hell he is saying, but Arthur just keeps provoking him, calling him a water tank head, slanted eyes, rat ears, several things. And right after saying all that, he tells him to accept the apologies of a humble insect like him. After that they even try to leave. but the small elf says he will not accept this. He cannot allow anyone to stain his family's name. And with his pride on the line, he challenges him to a duel. At that moment, Tesha asks what he thinks he is doing, challenging a disciple of Elder Virion, since even though he is a noble he should know his place. But that miserable little elf responds that his father taught him not to allow anyone to tarnish his pride. And as he turns to Arthur, he asks if he will accept the duel or not, or if he plans to run away and disgrace his master. Arthur wonders whether a duel would not be something serious in that country. But when he sees that all the adults are watching, he ends up accepting, while Tesha takes on the role of judge. As the battlefield is prepared, we see how all the adults are a large group of onlookers. Tesha then starts the fight, and the elf attacks Arthur, who with a punch sends him flying away. Surprised, he asks if he hit him too hard, but Tesha grabs his hand and runs away. While they run, Arthur thinks that he is growing more and more fond of the princess, and thus they spend the day pleasantly, exploring the entire city. In the shops where he was rejected for being a human, Tesha intervened, although at the end of the day she sees that he is quite thoughtful and asks if something is troubling him. He replies that it is nothing serious, while thinking that Virion had made him understand that his training would be very arduous, since the training of a beast tamer is comparable to diving into boiling pitch. Arthur decided to remain in a strange land without the support of his family, so that even surviving day to day will require great effort. But if he manages to endure it, he will obtain great results. Therefore Virion asks once again if he is sure, and Arthur makes it clear that he is determined. Then he tells Tesha that he is very excited to begin his training, since it will be he who decides his own future. Tesha responds that she also intends to work very hard so as not to lose to him. And on the following day, Arthur begins his training. In the process, he thinks that since he arrived in this world, time has passed very quickly. The path has been full of difficulties, and what awaits him is even more difficult. But currently he is very focused on advancing and dedicating himself to his training, since it will be he who will take the reins of his own destiny. Then we have a time skip of 3 years into the future, where now Tesha is already older. As usual, she continues to pester Arthur to wake up, and at that moment Arthur realizes that Virion is about to leave for a meeting. The king and the queen are also present, although suddenly he is interrupted by Tesha, who offers him a sandwich, letting him know that he should be grateful for a beautiful and kind young lady like her having prepared this for him. But while he eats, he asks where the pretty girl is. And later, while they train, Virion observes and thinks that now is the time to advance to the second phase. But before that, it is necessary to review the basic. First, it is necessary to stabilize mana, the foundation of magic, where one can obtain one of the following elements: fire, water, wind, or earth, in addition to the elements that can be learned depending on the race. For example, elves have better affinity with wind magic, while other races may have better affinities with water and earth, or with earth and fire, like the dwarves for example. But humans can manipulate all 4 elements. Each element has its affinity, and a person may have only one. But there are rare cases in which someone may have affinity with multiple elements. At that moment, Tesha asks her grandfather why Arthur was not practicing magic with her. Virion informs that it is because he is still weak, because the beast's will inside him is still ruining the balance between his body and his mana core, since that is a very powerful beast. And the first thing that needs to be done is to assimilate the mana into his body. At that very moment, Arthur recalls the instant when Tesha awakened his mana. Elves who awaken their mana before the age of 10 have great potential, and Tesha awakened it at 9. Since then he began to train his side, where she always gives him a lesson. Although at that point Virion informs Arthur that now is the moment for him to awaken the beast's will inside his body, and if he succeeds he will no longer feel pain and will become a true beast tamer. Virion begins the procedure using a bit of his magic to awaken the beast's will, warning that it will not be anything serious. But right after doing this, Arthur begins to feel unbearable pain, and at the same time releases a large amount of energy that throws Virion and Tesha far away. Virion is left surprised while Arthur faints, and shortly afterward, when meeting at the palace, Virion asks whether he happens to be familiar with the beast's will. Arthur hesitates a little before answering, but ends up confessing that it is that of a dragon. Virion cannot believe it, although he warns him that he cannot reveal this to anyone else, since a dragon's will can attract unwanted conflicts. Arthur thanks him while Virion informs him that his return trip home is scheduled for the next 4 months. He is surprised because he thought there were still 2 years left, but Virion explains that there will be a ritual exchange between youths of the 3 kingdoms. and during that period the entrance to the city of Surus will be open. So he will take advantage of that moment for him to return home, and Arthur feels a little sad and happy at the same time, because he will have to part from them, but he will be able to return to his family. But Varian pats his head and tells him to rest, since the next day he will begin to train him even more rigorously. Meanwhile, Tesha is quite sad upon learning the news. In a scene change during the night, the egg that Sylvia had given Arthur hatches, and he panics. But from the egg appears an adorable little dragon, and upon observing more closely he understands that it is a baby dragon that looks extremely adorable. But this dragon does not hesitate to bite him, and a mark quickly appears on Arthur, since thanks to this that dragon can now communicate with him telepathically. The dragon says some things that cannot be understood. The only person who can understand is Arthur himself. He asks the dragon to call him father, while naming her Sylvie, in honor of Sylvia. Instead of being Sylvie, he added an E at the end, and it became Sylvie. Congratulations to Arthur for that. Then he observes the mark and thinks that that symbol must mean something. But he is very sleepy, so he just decides to sleep. The next day, as always, Tesha goes to wake him up, but she is amazed when she sees the small dragon lying on his bed. She picks her up, although poor Sylvie wants to struggle. Shortly afterward, while he is heading to training, Tesha asks him to go with her, although little Sylvie refuses. And when he meets with Varian, he is surprised to see that Arthur has a small dragon on his head. He gets startled, but he understands that it was born after the assimilation of the beast's will. Arthur now finds himself worried, but Varian informs him that no one will believe that it is a dragon. He should simply say that it is a strange mana beast. And now moving on to the serious matter. Since he is a beast tamer, now he can train his beast core, as well as his mana core, and the best way to train this is in a real fight. So Varian quickly performs his beast fusion, choosing a much darker and extremely powerful form, far surpassing all of Arthur's expectations, who is unable to keep up with the pace and ends up surrendering. Varian returns to his normal form, commenting that his beast is the Shadow Panther, which manipulates wind instinctively, as well as sound, this being an advanced magic. And although his transformation is quite strong, it consumes a lot of energy. Next he hands him a sword, and warns him that now truly is the time to train, since before he was only provoking him. Thus a few days passed, during which he reached a level of mastery with the beast's will, and the pain in his chest never returned. Now he is able to keep up with Varian's movements, even though he is transformed. He spent days and days training, and in his moments of rest he behaved like a normal child. Until one day, while they were on the street, they encountered the boy from before, that miserable elf. He starts bothering him again, but Arthur pretends that he does not even know him. This provokes his anger, and he challenges him to a duel once more. He wants to get beaten again, and that really happens. He ends up losing again. Tesha tries to remember what his name was, and Arthur keeps calling him Rat Ears and Water Tank Head. He does not care at all. Then one of the guy's friends warns that Arthur can call him Feifei, because that is what his friends call him. Arthur asks them whether they will participate in the cultural exchange between the youths of the three kingdoms. They inform him that most high-status youths will attend, and Tesha will also be able to participate. Although at that Feifei mentions that he cannot allow his fragile princess to get lost again. The word fragile provokes Tesha's anger, and she pushes him away with a strike. And after that Arthur takes her away running, warning that a princess cannot believe in a subject. She is a princess and must behave as such. However, she is quite upset, because she feels that he will return home and will not be able to participate in the tournament with the others. She feels frustrated when thinking that she will be left without her best friend. Then in anger she shouts at him, runs away and cries, while Sylvie mentions that he should go after her, and at night he sneaks into her room. He looks at her window and invites her to go together to the forest. And after some time walking, we see that Tesha is very sleepy, although she is making an effort not to fall asleep. At that exact moment she asks what the human kingdom is like, and Arthur informs her that in truth he does not know. He mentions that he would appreciate it if he could stay there forever. Although when trying to answer he notices that she has fallen asleep. Then the awaited day arrives, where Arthur prepares to begin his journey back home. When he is near the portal, Varian hands him a compass, so that he does not get lost again. On this compass there is an emblem of royalty, which will help him a lot if he wishes to return there. Then he whispers to him that he should not go out so late at night, referring to the escape he had with Tesha. At that moment Arthur asks where Tesha is, although her parents also do not know. And when the portal opens he is about to depart, and Tesha runs desperately toward him. Arthur goes toward her, and little Tesha informs him that she will miss him very much, and that she will be very worried about him. Arthur then hugs her, and crying says that he will miss her too. Then the portal opens, And now it is time to say goodbye. Arthur bids farewell to the elves, and now in the floating city of Surus, he stands in front of his house where his father and his mother are. When he touches the door, his younger sister, Eleanor, receives him, and then his parents appear. While Arthur informs them that he has returned, his parents cannot believe that their son is back, and while they hug him with great love, little Eleanor asks her parents to please not cry. Arthur, upon seeing her, recalls the moment when his father revealed that he would have a little sister, and Arthur introduces himself to her as her older brother. A short time later, already at home, they ask how Arthur feels. Since he had previously told them that his body was going through something strange, Arthur informs them that they do not have to worry about anything, that he is fine. But Eleanor is somewhat jealous of all the attention that Arthur is receiving. His mother asks him to come closer, since he is the older brother they had spoken so much about to her. Arthur tells his sister that he is very happy to be able to see her, and after things calmed down a bit, Arthur updated his parents. Although despite trusting them, he omitted the part about having met Sylvia. That is why he told them that he survived the fall. He ended up using a subconscious combination magic, and was very lucky. At least that was what he said. In addition to that, his journey through the Elven Kingdom. He hates having to be inconvenient with his parents, but it is very risky for him to tell them the whole truth before he becomes someone very strong. Reynolds asks who the little one is, and Arthur introduces her to them. He says that this is a small mana beast. He takes the opportunity to comment that the creature's mother was very sick. That is the reason why he decided to help and take it to raise. Sylvie quickly takes a liking to Eleanor, while Reynolds asks Arthur what stage his mana core is at. Although his wife begins to question him, because their son has just arrived, and that is the only thing he can ask. Reynolds really wanted to compare his growth with that of his son. Arthur asks him what he has been doing, and he reveals that he is currently working at the Elscha auction house. In addition to that, he is instructing the security staff, and a few years ago his mana core reached dark orange. Then we discover in ascending order the color of mana. First it starts black, then it goes to red, from red to orange, from orange to yellow, and from yellow to silver, and lastly from silver to white, this being the most powerful, although each color has 3 stages, such as dark, standard and light. His father, as an augmenter, possesses great physical strength. However, to ignite his mana core he needs to make an extraordinary effort. At that moment Reynolds is surprised to see that his son is in the light red range, that is, almost surpassing him, and because of this he is excited to take his son to train in the courtyard. While meanwhile Eleanor begins to complain, because his father cursed when he realized that his son had almost surpassed him. That is why Reynolds receives his due reprimand. But at that moment Reynolds' superiors enter the room. He takes the opportunity to introduce Vincent, who is visiting his son's house, who is also his superior and a good friend. Arthur introduces himself to the whole family, while Vincent is surprised to see that Arthur has good manners, and does not seem to be Reynolds' son. Then he meets Lilia, the daughter of the Reshias, where she is delighted with the little Sylvie. At that moment Reynolds takes the opportunity to inform Vincent that at that instant they are going to the courtyard to train. And once they are in the courtyard, Vincent cannot believe that his son has just arrived, and the father already wants to train with him. So he goes there and scolds the poor Reynolds. Although what surprised him the most was that Arthur awakened at an early age. He has already reached the light red level, which by itself is already quite an achievement, because even prodigies of 11 or 12 years old who entered the prestigious Academy of Surus barely reached dark red. Arthur considers that it is not a good idea to keep talking about his secrets, since he did not practice much while assimilating Sylvia's will, and if he had done so he would already be in an even higher position. They then prepare for combat, beginning to block each other's attacks with great effectiveness. But Reynolds asks his son to put in more effort, and upon seeing that Arthur becomes more intense he decides to get serious, enveloping his fist with the fire element. Arthur understands that the conjurers of that world have greater affinities with certain elements, so when they see the elements with which they are most attuned, they quickly begin to control them. But this is not the case for augmenters, since they have to exert great effort in order to discover their compatibility. But in his other life there was something very similar to mana, namely Kai, and unlike the elements it was necessary to control one's own Kai. In his old world there was no innate incompatibility, although more effort was required. But good fortune did not fail him. Since he arrived in this place he has been doing well. So now it is time to show his results, and Arthur becomes serious, and all the spectators are surprised. He begins to exchange blows with his father, although Reynolds continues to be superior. But thanks to his control of Kai, and his training with Virion, which was very fruitful, he shows his father that he is capable of controlling lightning. Reynolds is surprised to see that Arthur can control advanced fire magic. And not only that, but also water magic. All those present are impacted after the great demonstration of little Arthur, and his father runs to hug him, asking when he learned to do all that. Arthur reveals that he learned recently, although he still does not know how to control it very well. Vincent's wife then comments that this child is on another level, and later, as they go to have some drinks to digest how powerful Arthur is, he asks Reynolds if he is aware of how prodigious his son is and of the promising future that awaits him. Reynolds replies that he does not know very well, because not every child awakens their magic core at 3 years old. Vincent recommends that Reynolds enroll his son at the Cyrus Academy, since it is the most famous and prestigious magic academy on the continent. But Vincent's wife, whose name is Tabitha, informs them that their son has great potential, and they are interested in investing in his future, so they will not need to worry about the academy enrollment. But Alice hesitates, since they have already helped them too much, to the point of also wanting to pay for their son's studies. Vincent replies that there is no reason for concern. Moreover, thanks to his work, he knows the academy's headmistress, and if he speaks with her directly, they will be able to enroll him even at 8 years old. But at that, Arthur interrupts and asks if he may give his opinion. He thanks them for the interest, but it has been a long time since he last saw his family, so he would like to spend a little more time with them, and then he steps away from the table, informing them that he is quite tired, so he asks for permission to withdraw. Shortly after, Vincent wonders if the recommendation was inappropriate, and Arthur, in turn, ends up being followed by Lilia, who tells him to keep going on the path he is on. Soon after, she takes him to the household servants, where they are quite bothered by Arthur. Shortly after, they reveal that Miss Lilia comes there when she is stressed, and Arthur can notice that she seems much more lively in that place than when she was outside. One of the maids mentions that although they are not sorcerers, Lilia's parents above all wish that their daughter will awaken her magic core. It is evident that Lilia also wishes it, but coming from a non-sorcerer couple, it is quite complicated for her to succeed. She feels great pressure on her shoulders, and later Arthur finds his parents in a room. They say that they missed him very much, and that no matter what happened, he will always be their beloved son. And on that day, they were able to discover that he will be a first-rate sorcerer. Although the best news was having him back, Arthur tries to talk to them about enrolling in the Cyrus Academy, but Reynolds warns him that they can talk about that at another time. But before leaving, they inform him that Vincent is thinking about his well-being, and Arthur replies that they should not worry. He knows very well that Vincent's family does not have ulterior intentions, and already on the following day, Arthur runs excitedly to meet the twin horns, where Angela does not hesitate to hug him, and everyone is very happy to see that Arthur is still alive. But Jasmine begins to examine his whole body and quickly hugs him, apologizing to him, because she feels guilty for not having been able to protect him. Although a little later, when everyone is already feeling better, the twin horns tell him about their adventures. He thinks that he knows nothing about the continent, much less about the kingdom of Sapin. He feels that it would be a good idea to become an adventurer in order to learn all kinds of things that would be beneficial to him. But he does not know how to tell this to his parents, since he has barely returned and already wants to become an adventurer. And in this way, he will have to distance himself from them once again. Meanwhile, we see Lilia, who is somewhat pensive, and now we see Arthur, who is practicing a time-type magic. But he becomes exhausted and comments that he can only endure 2 seconds in that state. But he knows that he must master it if he wants to protect his loved ones. At that moment, Sylvie approaches him, and when he tries to hug her, he sees that she is a bit dirty, so he goes to bathe her. Sylvie is very happy while she is taking the bath, and Arthur thinks that Vincent's family has definitely chosen many benefits from the betting house they own, since they live in a very luxurious way. And at that moment, he recalls that the servants spoke about Miss Lilia, and shortly afterward he finishes bathing Sylvie, and now she smells nice. But at that moment, his mother and the others inform him that now it is his turn. Soon after, we see him at the barber shop, and the barber is very happy to have him there, so he says that he will fix him up. Shortly afterward, he leaves there, and the women are surprised to see that he looks quite charming. He asks why they are so committed to making him look good, and they reveal that they want to take him to the Ustia betting house. There are many members of royalty there, so he cannot look sloppy. Shortly after that, they walk around the city so that he can get to know a bit of the city of Cyrus. While he observes the shops, his mother informs him that it is time to buy some clothes. Soon after, he goes to a statue and keeps tossing some things into its hand, and some students also toss something at his head. and later he asks who they are. Lilia explains that they are students of the Cyrus Academy, and Arthur feels that they seem to be looking for an argument, and Lilia explains that with those uniforms they are practically members of royalty or something similar. As they move forward, Arthur notices something, and the women explain to him that that shop is a store of magic cores extracted from mana beasts. They can amplify the power of whoever possesses them, and Arthur finds himself somewhat surprised, since among the elves they did not do that. Tabitha mentions that the effects of the cores can vary, and if they have a beast will they can be worth up to 100 gold coins. That money is enough for them to live peacefully for 250 years, and Tabitha informs Arthur that some will be sold at the next auction, and she will arrange everything so that he can see it. But Arthur feels quite comfortable with his beast core, and of course he does, since he has a dragon core, which is the rarest of all. At that moment Lilia mentions that perhaps with one of those cores, she could become a mage, although Tabitha replies that a beast core is not a shortcut to awakening one's sorcery. Furthermore, it makes no sense to buy something so expensive for a child. And with that, Arthur realizes that Lilia is desperate to become a mage, but thus they continue with their day. While they have lunch, Arthur thinks that perhaps according to the conversation with his mother, she is not pressuring the girl, but her father is affecting her greatly. Shortly afterward he looks at her and feels a bit embarrassed, but later when he raises his head to look once again she has already disappeared. And then he goes after her, and they arrive at a weapon shop where more affordable magic cores are sold. Arthur explains that he possesses a beast core and that it does not guarantee that one can use magic, but Lilia remains insistent, saying that he would not understand because he is someone special. Although she tried to persuade her parents to give her a core, they did not allow her to have one, which makes Arthur understand that the reason she feels this pressure is because she wants to prove to her parents that she can be a mage. Although during the confrontation with Arthur, she ends up bumping into some Cyrus students. They glare at her, and the shop owner even tries to intervene, but soon after he realizes that they are Cyrus students, and he says that they can do whatever they want, and that he will go have a cup of coffee. The young men loom over the girl and wonder how they should have their fun, while Arthur hopes that it will not come to that. But before he can shout at everyone, Tabitha intervenes, and the shop owner asks what the hell she thinks she is doing, since they are students of the Cyrus Academy. But Tabitha informs everyone that if they harm the daughter of the House of Estia, they will bitterly regret it. And when the students realize that she is a lady of the largest betting house in Cyrus and one of the Academy's major contributors, they back off with their tails between their legs, though not before commenting that it will be very easy to enter Cyrus by paying the entrance fee. Arthur becomes quite irritated, but Lilia stops him, and shortly afterward, at the house, they inform Vincent that there is no reason for concern, and recommend that Arthur enroll in the academy so that such things do not happen again, since they have made considerable donations to the academy. An incident like this will not be enough to deprive him of a position. But upon hearing this, Lilia becomes upset and asks Vincent whether he intends to see Arthur take her place, since she still cannot awaken her magic. The young girl is frustrated and tells her father that she hates him, as well as the poor Arthur too. That night Arthur goes to look for her in her room, but no one answers. Then one of the servants informs him that she is at the hideout. Meanwhile, we see that Lilia is very frustrated, remembering that since she was little she wanted to be a sorceress to make her parents proud. But despite the passage of time her magic core has still not awakened, and most likely never will. Even so, Arthur arrives at her hideout, informing her that her parents are very worried. After that he tries to apologize to her, but it is Lilia who apologizes to him, confessing that she feels envious, since he appeared out of nowhere with incredible power, drawing all of her father's attention. She apologizes, since she is the one who failed to awaken her magic. Despite all the time that has passed, she believes that her father and mother are certainly tired of her, and Arthur understands a little. He can comprehend that cold sensation of sinking into the darkness of one's own remorse, and so he looks at her face, and tells her that even he can see how hard she is trying. He says that when he was separated from his parents, he met a young woman who encouraged him in that same way, and after showing a bit of magic to her, he comments that her father and mother also know how much she strives, and that the attention he receives from her father is basically because he is something new. Lilia smiles and mentions that her father wants her to be a sorceress, because he knows that this will make her happy, and for that very reason he makes many donations to the Cyrus Academy. At that, Arthur asks whether she is sure that she wants to use magic, and in a scene change he is gathered in the living room with everyone. He informs them that Lilia has left home in order to train and awaken her magic. Vincent is quite irritated and asks how he could do this without consulting him first, but Arthur replies that this was Lilia's decision, and that she left because if she spoke to them first she would hesitate. For that reason she left a letter, and upon reading it, he realizes that his daughter felt like a burden for not possessing magic. Although she swears that she will become a great sorceress so that she can see them again. Vincent collapses to the floor feeling frustrated, because his daughter believes that being a conjurer would lead to a happy future. But the truth is that his daughter does not need to be a conjurer, because even without magic she is still his daughter, and all he wants is for her to remain by his side. But at that moment Lilia suddenly appears and apologizes to her parents for having lied to them. Vincent wonders what is going on and Arthur apologizes to him, mentioning that he knows what it is like for a father to lose a child, especially considering that he made his loved ones suffer for a similar reason. But he did all of this so that Lilia could understand that her parents love her unconditionally, and that she does not need to be a sorceress to feel proud of herself. Vincent tells Arthur not to worry because he is the only one responsible. He apologizes to Arthur's family since he was insensitive in wanting to send his son to the academy. He asks Reynolds and Alice to forgive him and also apologizes to Lilia, telling her that she does not need to go to the academy if she does not want to. And even though she is not a sorceress, he promises that he will make her very happy. And Lilia replies that she wants to go despite everything, although she cannot do so now, since she wishes to learn how to use magic first. She wants to be a sorceress so that she can make everyone happy, just like Arthur, and her parents then hug her, saying that they know she will succeed someday. And meanwhile Arthur says that he will take responsibility for awakening Lilia's mana, and shortly after, both Elena and Lilia sit in the middle of the room. Arthur teaches them that there is a breathing method that will help awaken their mana, since it intensifies when breathing in a meditative and focused manner. The girls try it while Tabitha wonders whether they will succeed, since she had never heard of anything like that. And as the girls breathe, Elena manages to see a light, but it disappears because she stopped breathing as instructed. But Lilia is unable to see anything like that, and Arthur decides to help them a bit. After some time Lilia is able to see small lights, and later in her hideout she celebrates with the servants. Arthur feels satisfied with her great progress, and he informs them that they will have to train for 2 or 3 years until the energy stabilizes. They will have to train every day by breathing in order to awaken their magic. Sometime later the royal cavalry heads to the betting house, while we observe the despicable mage wondering whether he will find something that entertains him. And after a while they arrive at the grand auction, where Arthur is surprised by the size of the place. Once inside, Arthur thinks that there must surely be aristocrats and adventurers enjoying that wonderful celebration. The types of items in that place seem fascinating. Meanwhile, Reynolds informs the security team that they must keep everything in order. After all, he is the head of security. And shortly after, everyone gathers in the Great Hall, where Vincent welcomes everyone, especially the king and his entire family. The audience applauds and Vincent proceeds to begin the 11th anniversary of the Recia auction, something that brings nostalgia to Arthur, as he vividly remembers his previous life. Later we see that the security team this time also has the help of the twin horns to protect any items that are at the auction. The first artifact is a sword forged by a renowned craftsman. It possesses the ability to paralyze the opponent. The bidding starts at 50 gold coins, and Arthur considers the item interesting, something he could recreate with his magic. But at that moment he realizes that Sylvie is nowhere to be seen, and he tells his mother that he will go look for her. Meanwhile, we see that because she is very curious, she ends up meeting the same despicable man from before. Then Vincent announces another exquisite item, the cub of a world lion, a magical beast that can even reach the rank of a retainer. Quartz informs his father, the king, that he wants it, and the auction begins at 100 gold coins. Everyone starts bidding desperately, but the king does not play around and immediately offers 1,000 gold coins. And everyone understands that they will not be able to compete with him. On the other side, Arthur continues searching for Sylvie, and upon hearing her voice he begins to walk toward her. Meanwhile, the item is handed over to the king, and at that moment we see that Sylvie is very nervous in the presence of the individual. He asks her to come closer, although she refuses, and luckily Arthur appears just in time, and quickly realizes that he must be a conjurer in the king's service, so he must treat him with respect to avoid trouble. Informing him that she is his companion, the individual laments it, as he believed she was an auction item, mentioning that he possesses a very interesting mana beast. At that moment Sylvie runs toward Arthur, causing annoyance to the individual. Arthur says that he needs to take his leave. However, that despicable man tells him that he must leave that creature there, since for a long time they have been searching for a mana beast worthy of him, and that he is the one who should reap all the benefits of that potential. And for that reason he threatens Arthur with his flare, telling him that that mana beast would be better in his hands. After all, he is in the king's service, which means it is better for that country. Even a child like him should understand that. But Arthur simply decides to ignore him, turning his back, which enrages him, saying that his family will bear the consequences of his actions, and Arthur, furious, overwhelms him with his aura, asking him to repeat what he said. The auction hall windows begin to shatter, and the king senses a powerful presence. Even Vincent is unable to withstand it. The bloodlust is overwhelming, and the royal guard surrounds the king to keep him safe. The king's conjurer panics, and Arthur, realizing that he is making a mistake, interrupts his bloodlust, and the auction is quickly halted to search for the one responsible. Arthur apologizes to his parents, and at that moment the king approaches Reynolds, informing him that he needs to speak with him. In another scene we see him stating that it is very unfortunate that he was unable to capture the intruder, but he demands disciplinary measures. However, at that moment the conjurer intervenes, telling the king that there was no damage, so a merciful response would be fair, by declaring him innocent. He says that Arthur possesses an incredible mana beast, and that he could take care of it in an ideal environment. The king informs that Sebastian has been the royal family's bodyguard for many years, and for that reason he has been thinking for some time about how he should reward him. And now he has noticed that he has great interest in that mana beast, so he proposes that the boy hand over that mana beast to his servant, because with it this incident would not have occurred and everything would be fine. Arthur tries to intervene, but his mother stops him, and Reynolds, in turn, apologizes to the king, but he has no intention of intervening in the adoption of his son's mana beast, since he is not in a position to say what should be done about it. Because of this, the king asks Arthur directly what he intends to do. He responds directly that he does not agree with him, and that he will not obtain any replacement for Sylvie. The king then proposes a trade of the world lion cub he has just purchased for his mana beast, but Arthur once again apologizes to him, yet he must refuse the offer, as he has no intention of yielding or selling Sylvie. The king, somewhat annoyed, asks one last time whether he will not allow him to keep his companion. Arthur stands up and answers the question with another question instead. He asks directly what price he would place on the heads of his children. The king asked him 3 times, and all 3 times Arthur refused. But even so, because of his pride, the king does not give up and does not accept that answer. And that is why Arthur asked that question: what price would he give for his children? Sebastian, indignant, orders his knights to attack him, but Arthur in an instant incapacitates them all, and the enraged Sebastian declares that that creature will be his, and for that reason he attacks Arthur directly. But Arthur simply stops time, and now the only ones able to move are the 2 of them. As Arthur approaches, Sebastian panics, and in an instant Arthur breaks his leg, causing Sebastian to beg for help, but Arthur warns him that no one can hear him, and for that reason he must pay close attention. Sebastian responds that neither his family nor Arthur will escape, since Arthur humiliated him. But Arthur reminds him that he is now in a very desperate position. Then, frightened, he begs for mercy, and quickly time begins to flow again. Arthur ends up fainting, but upon awakening he finds himself in a bed, understanding that he needs to train much more. Then his mother enters the room together with Sylvie. Arthur takes the opportunity to ask what happened after he fainted. His mother says that everyone panicked, and that she tried to heal him, although the doctor said that he would wake up soon, but to her it felt like an eternity. Shortly afterward he goes with his mother to the market, where they buy a shoot for Elinor. But Arthur is somewhat worried about his family's budget, because his father could lose his job. But Alice lets him know that he needs to relax. After all, she also works, and we discover that many of his mother's products are sold in the city, thanks to Tabitha, who has many contacts. Upon returning home, Reynolds tells the king's messenger that it is not a matter of money. His son could have died, and when he enters Arthur's room his father asks if he is all right. Arthur reassures him, and although the king's messenger stands up, he offers apologies for what occurred the previous day. He offers a compensation with gold coins to make up for what happened, but Reynolds feels indignant because he believes they are trying to downplay the incident. Arthur understands what is important, since now he must play the role of the humble victim, so he thanks the messenger for the king's apologies, and he informs that the guards who attacked him were dismissed. But that is not enough for Reynolds, although the messenger reminds him that his son challenged the king, and furthermore he also pointed out the failure in their security service, and Reynolds shows a certain annoyance, but his son asks him to stop, since he is aware that things escalated, but now he is fine, and out of curiosity he asks the messenger what happened to the conjurer in the king's service. The messenger informs that he was dismissed from his position, and when he awakened he began telling everyone what had happened to him. The king simply stated that it made no sense, although the messenger reports that they reached the conclusion that the mana of the two soldiers was reflected onto him, and that this disturbed his spells, and currently the king is dissatisfied with this entire fiasco. For that reason he is offering this as a gesture of reconciliation. He comments that he understands that his son has great talent, but advises him to educate him better, and once that meeting ends Reynolds hands the bag of gold to his son. After all, it was he who nearly died. Arthur thanks him, while Reynolds informs him that his attack was spectacular. And at night in his room Arthur understands that he is still a child in that world, and if he wishes to oppose the power of a nation, he needs to obtain power that is equal to it. The next day he takes a walk through Sirius Academy, where he is observed by a mysterious animal. Curious, he begins to follow it and is suddenly introduced to the director of Sirius Academy. She informs him that she was waiting for him, and Arthur is well aware that this academy is famous for training many students, as well as businessmen, royal guards, leaders, and military officers. This is a place where all children with magic eventually enter, and now he finds himself before the director of the academy, who possesses great power. She mentions that it is a pleasure to meet him, and that it is time to verify everything Vincent said about him. So after protecting herself with a barrier, Arthur feels her intense power. But now it is his turn to show his own, since he must prove that Vincent did not lie about his abilities. He then uses a wind spell to attack her with enormous rocks. Although the director does not mind, Arthur then uses the earth element, but she repels it very easily with her daggers, which leads him to attack directly with his fire element. But the director tells him to stop. She admits that he impressed her greatly with his abilities, but he tends to overestimate his skills too much. The truth is that Vincent told her that he has great talent for magic and combat. But now it is time for the final test, and she asks him to try to remain conscious. Then she begins to use her sound element to try to knock Arthur unconscious, leaving him surprised to see that the director is also a specialized mage. And upon finishing the test, the director informs him that he passed, and that he has great talent, so much so that she feels the desire to personally teach him how to use wind magic. Although she is aware that he is still hiding something, Arthur reveals that he is also capable of using the water element, making him a quad elemental. The director asks what he has to say, because she is aware that he did not come there only to show his abilities. Arthur informs her that he is there because of her, since she possesses great authority and influence that he needs, and for that reason he wishes for her to take responsibility for protecting his family. If she accepts this condition, he will enroll in Sirius Academy, and he will become her disciple. He ends up surprising the director, as not even the rulers of Sapin would dare make such a strange proposal. But Arthur replies that he is certain it is worth it, and believes that she thinks the same, but he does not intend to enroll until he reaches the age of his peers. There are still 3 years left for that, but he does not intend to waste time. He wishes to live his life to the fullest, and for that he will become an adventurer, in order to learn many things about that world. So he wants to use these 3 years to increase his experience as an adventurer, and the director understands what he means. So she informs him that once he speaks with his family and manages to convince them, they will have an agreement. But in a scene change we see how Alice completely opposes this idea. She does not want her son to become an adventurer, since not much time has passed since he returned, and she does not intend to allow her beloved son to put himself in danger again. But Reynolds asks her to calm down, yet she asks how he can ask that of her. She remembers that they suffered greatly when they thought he had died, although he recommends that she first listen to what Arthur has to say. In addition, he was thinking that it would be good for him to have a guardian to protect him while he was away. But Alice continues insisting, and Arthur intervenes, stating that he will not go simply to seek adventure. He wishes to expand his horizons, and he can return home every few months so that she can feel at ease. His mother asks him to promise, and he does. In addition, he informs her that he does not intend to depart immediately. After all, he wants to learn much more about the continent, since there are many things he is unaware of, and he also wishes to experience the excitement they felt when they were adventurers. His mother manages to understand him, but asks him not to keep any more secrets, since they were not aware that he was a quad elemental. Arthur informs them that there will be no more secrets, but we know that he has many secrets and will not tell them. He would even like to be able to tell them, but many things are not easy to explain, so he decides to keep them to himself. At that moment, Reynolds informs Arthur that he will be able to go on adventures, but he will have to have a guardian to protect him in case of emergency. It is then that they gather with the twin horns to decide who will act as guardian. After discussing for a while, Jasmine ends up volunteering to be his new guardian, something that surprises everyone, since she strongly dislikes protection jobs. But she is very excited to do it, since it concerns her dear Arthur. Reynolds is satisfied with the idea, since although Ellen or Durden were in mind as guardians, the truth is that Jasmine's combat abilities are perfect to take care of his son. Alice asks Jasmine if she is sure there is no problem, and she says that there is not. So now everything is decided. And in addition, Jasmine reached the light orange level in the previous year, so she has mastered wind magic, and for that reason she is suited for this role. Now that everything is decided, they say goodbye to the twin horns, and the group notices that Lilia is meditating. Eleanor begins to scold her because she is training without her, while Arthur is glad to see that Lilia is now able to meditate on her own. And although his sister is meditating as well, he hopes that she does not awaken her mana at an early age, since he does not want her to draw attention. Soon after that, he asks his parents if he may go to the auction house, because he needs a sword. Now we see that he is with Vincent, and in the auction house warehouse, Vincent gives him complete freedom to look for a sword that pleases him. Meanwhile, Alice is worried about him, because he is taking a long time to choose a sword, but Reynolds tells her to stay calm. She calms down a bit, and we observe that Arthur is having difficulty, since despite there being many swords, none of them catch his attention. The detail is that most of the swords are two-handed or greatswords, nothing that suits someone his size. After all, most soldiers in that world are augmenters, and it is at that moment that Sylvie draws his attention and leads him to where a small staff is located. When he picks up the staff, he is surprised, because it is quite heavy, which seems very curious, since the center of gravity is far too unbalanced to be a staff. It feels more like a sword, and because of that he tries to draw it using his spiritual energy. Although at that moment we see that Sylvie's emblem begins to react, and Arthur observes a strange script, and manages to draw the sword, being surprised at how magnificent this weapon is. But it is still very heavy for him, although even so he puts it to the test, causing damage to the man's private property. At that moment he notices an engraving on the blade of the sword, and that reaction caused sparks, making it fall. Although when he picks it up again, he quickly realizes that its balance has changed. Not only that, both the length of the hilt and the blade are now perfectly adjusted to his body. In his past life he had many excellent swords, but never one that adapted so well to him. So he wonders who the forger of that sword is, although suddenly his father and Vincent come looking for him, informing him that it is now time for dinner. Arthur quickly picks up another sword, and says that he wishes to take it, although he is still wearing the mysterious sword at his waist, and Reynolds gives his approval, and says that this sword is good for him. But Vincent, who is no fool, asks what that staff is that he has at his waist. Arthur makes up that he found it on the ground and simply picked it up, and Vincent asks the person in charge if they happen to have records of it. The person in charge informs him that a strange old man delivered it and then left. They had many appraisers take a look at that staff, but all of them said it was just a sturdy staff, and since they felt bad about throwing it away, they simply kept it there. But he asks Vincent if he should take it to a higher level appraiser, which worries Arthur. He then looks at Vincent with pleading eyes, saying that he also likes that staff, and that he was thinking of using it. By calling him Uncle Vincent, he ends up convincing him, and after that time passed, Arthur took the opportunity to spend time with his loved ones, and at the same time he was gradually preparing himself to become an adventurer. Then 9 years passed since he arrived in that world. They celebrate in great style, and when night arrives it is time to open the presents, and the first one is from his mother, which are gloves. She comments that these gloves have 3 large gems imbued with healing spells, and the other present is from Vincent, who asks him to marry him. Although Tabitha asks him to stop joking, and to take it a bit more seriously, he warns that he has a present for him and another for his mother, because while his mana level reaches the limit, the gem on his mother's ring will light up, warning that her son will be in danger. Next it is the turn of the twin horns, and they give him a scroll that transmits sounds. With this he will be able to leave a message by channeling his mana into the scroll, and thus his mother will be able to receive it and respond once. Arthur thanks everyone for having given him present, so now on the following day he will depart, and for that reason he informs everyone that he will do his best so they do not worry. Shortly after, while Arthur prepares for the journey, he thinks that now in that world he has a family and companions that he cherishes. He does not wish to lose the peace he achieved in that world. Therefore he must strengthen himself, and obtain even more power to protect the people he loves. Soon after, just before leaving, his father asks him not to get full of himself, and not to try to solve everything alone. He hopes that he will always seek Jasmine's support, and his parents inform him that they will always support him. And upon leaving the house, he tells Jasmine that it is time to begin their adventure. After continuing their journey, the youths arrive at the Adventurers Guild of Surus, where Jasmine asks the receptionist to allow her companion to take the rank evaluation exam. Shortly afterward, right after registering, the receptionist takes them to the guild's overseer. Arthur thinks that he is concealing his identity so they cannot identify him, and he can go unnoticed by royalty. At that moment, the guild leader introduces himself as Caspian, the master of the Adventurers Guild of Surus. He explains that normally one must first take the written exam, and then evaluate them on a core in order to perform the classification exam. But because it is a request from Jasmine, he decided to make an exception. He whispers in his ear that the other day he saw his father calling Miss Flansworth, and then Caspian takes Arthur's hand, where he realizes that this individual is quite strong. Caspian informs him that he does not necessarily need to register under his real name, and Arthur feels relieved by the news and introduces himself as Note. As soon as he heads toward a training field, Arthur asks Jasmine if she is close to the guild leader. She replies that in a way yes, since her parents have strong connections with the guild. At that moment, the sylph comes out of the bag and Jasmine mentions that she seems different from last time. Arthur responds that his companion seems to have the ability to change form, and shortly afterward they arrive at the evaluation area, where Arthur observes the young adventurers taking their exam. The youths demonstrate great abilities, but also show some flaws, for which reason the boy receives a C classification, a very good age bracket for that age. And then they announce that they will conduct the test of someone named Halia, but then they stop her, and without the need to perform an evaluation they inform that she is a rank B adventurer, without even taking the exam, and this leaves some adventurers surprised and indignant. The third to take the exam is Luca Wise. He questions the examiners about why they did not exempt him from the exam, since he wants them to simply give him a classification. He is an 11-year-old caster, and already possesses a light orange-colored monocore. He specializes in fire, and Arthur observes that he is an elf. Upon starting the exam, Lucas begins his attack, and the examiner neutralizes him in an instant. But Lucas proceeds by conjuring an enormous rain of fire. Arthur wonders whether he will be able to control it, but we realize that he loses control. Then the examiner needs to correct him. After controlling the situation, she congratulates Lucas for possessing great mana potential, but he still lacks practice, even though this wretch tries to attack her sneakily. But at that moment a sword interrupts his attack, and the sword belongs to Arthur himself. Lucas announces that this exam is invalid, since there was interference from a third party, but one of the examiners informs that the exam had already ended, and likewise he used a sneak attack, which is quite dishonorable. As punishment they assign him rank D, and then remove him from the dueling arena. And next it is Note's turn, or Arthur's. I will call him Note to get into the mood. As he heads toward the combat arena, Jasmine is surprised to see his great potential, and the examiner mentions that he has no kind of information about him. Although upon seeing the aura that Note is emanating he feels terror. But at that moment the guild leader appears, and says that he will be the one to conduct the exam. But his colleague responds that he is an A-ranked mage, and that at the very least he should not be the one evaluating candidates directly. But Caspian replies that in fact he does so because he has close ties with the evaluator. He asks whether Note has any problem with that, but he replies that he does not. And then he fully understands that it will be a very difficult battle, but he becomes enthusiastic, and as the combat begins they face each other. And since this anime is a disgrace, they simply do not show the fight and cut everything. What a ripoff. But one thing happened. Note ended up obtaining rank B, officially becoming an adventurer. Meanwhile, in Caspian's offices, the examiners cannot believe that on that day, so many adventurers were promoted to rank B, since this had never happened before. But they secretly explained to him that they approved the elves and the dwarves, so that they could register in the Adventurers Guild. For his part, Luca is a half-elf from the Wise family, which has been raising mages in questionable ways, while on the other hand Halia was exempted from the exam, because her endorsement attests to her abilities, and she is someone they cannot get involved with, revealing that Halia is an orphan of the Kingdom of Darth, that is, the nation of the dwarves. The examiners question about the masked one, but Caspian replies that compared to Luca and Halia, he knows absolutely nothing about him. The only thing he is sure of is that he does not represent the dwarves. Moreover, the fact that someone from the most powerful family of fire mages in his kingdom is his endorser makes everything even more interesting. But what makes Note more frightening is not his fire magic, but rather his sword handling. Remembering the fight he had against him, Note provided a great battle, despite fighting as if he had not yet adapted to his body, so that when he grows, he will be able to become someone truly terrifying. Meanwhile, Arthur thinks that after his fight with Caspian, he feels that he has grown too accustomed to this world, and because of that he let himself be carried away by the abilities he obtained there, and he neglected his sword handling a little. As they move forward, they run into Ellie, who mentions that what he did in the arena was quite reckless, but that if he had not done it, she herself would have. At that moment Luca was just watching, wondering if that would be a gathering of rank B adventurers. Since he also has rank B, they tell him not to bother, commenting that they will not invite him to their club. Since the club does not usually break rules, Luca ends up getting irritated and attacks him. Although upon noticing that they are drawing too much attention, he decides to follow his path in peace. Just like the group there that teleports to a beast grazing zone, there the lower ranked adventurers begin to train, in addition to collecting some materials necessary for missions, soon after they begin to move toward their destination, where Arthur notices that Jasmine possesses great speed. As they advance he recalls his fight against Caspian, but there were great explosions, and suddenly an enormous cursed boar appears at the location, which begins to devour novice adventurers. Jasmine warns him that it is time to flee that place, because that monster does not belong to that zone, which worries her a bit. Although as they advance they realize that the monster had been caged, but ended up escaping. The boar upon seeing them charges at them. Although they manage to evade, Jasmine attacks the monster and asks Arthur to run away. But at one moment she loses her balance, and Arthur acts quickly and grabs her in his arms. But the boar notices the presence of more adventurers, and prepares to attack them. But Jasmine leaps to defend them, and Arthur tries to do the same, but he is restrained by his inner voice, which warns him that he can still draw it in, causing Arthur to feel that he must not make the same mistake that he made in the fight against Caspian. When the boar charges at the adventurers, Arthur attacks it with a thrust of fire, accompanied by continuous slashes, managing to defeat the boar with that attack, and shortly afterward Jasmine pinches his cheek, confessing that she would have preferred him to have been scared when they were fighting that thing. That is, she would have preferred him to have acted like a normal child. But it is not as if she were trying to interfere in his personal matters, and Arthur cannot understand her. And at nightfall she tells him that she became an adventurer to distance herself from her family, since the Flamesworth family had produced great mages for generations, and they always taught her that the fire element was her strength. At that time she took pride in her family, and since she awakened magic before her siblings, her parents had great hopes for her, and perhaps because of that, when they discovered that she could not use fire magic, they began to despise her and call her useless. But Arthur tells her to stop, saying that this is not correct, because although mana cores have levels, there is no level for elements, and everything depends on how they are used. Jasmine laughs and apologizes, because he is always very serious, and she never imagined that something like that would upset him. But Arthur became irritated because he remembered his past life, when he himself was considered useless. At that moment Jasmine says that when she met the Twin Horns once, she fought in the same way he did that day, and the Twin Horns reprimanded her, because at that time she did not know how to fight as a team, although thanks to them, she changed a lot. This makes Arthur wonder whether at some point he will be able to change as well. And after recalling all of his experiences, he feels that he must become stronger to protect them. But at that moment we see Tesha spying on him. She is quite irritated because every time she sees Arthur, he is always with a different woman. Poor boy. Then Tesha's grandfather appears and asks why she is jealous of Arthur. And then he proposes that she also start attending Sirius Academy. And in the blink of an eye 2 years pass. During these 2 years Arthur becomes a renowned swordsman, and everyone knows the name Noshi, the masked swordsman. However, 2 years have already passed, and now Arthur observes his new objective, and thus the anime comes to an end. This anime here is a disaster. It is very poorly animated. I have never seen such a bad adaptation in my life, but the story itself is very good. Well, if there is a second season, I hope it comes from a better studio, because this one is extremely bad. That is it. Stay with God. Thanks, take care, and until the next video.